Okay, welcome to section 2 of chapter 3, where we will look at motor development. I'm not going to talk about the dynamic systems view. You should read it on your own. I just don't really like it, to tell you the truth. And so I always skip it. I don't think it adds a lot to what we already know. Or okay, anyways, but go ahead and read it. I could ask you about it on the test still. Okay, reflexes is what we'll cover first, and then we'll look at gross and fine motor skills. So reflexes, these are built-in reactions to stimuli that govern the newborn's movements. So they're born with reflexes. They're automatic and beyond the newborn's control. They are basically survival mechanisms that a baby is born with. They helped a baby survive within the environment. Some of their reflexes, I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find out, to see how they could help them survive in today's world, but some of them were important, more in the evolutionary past of humans. And I'm going to look at just 4 of their reflexes in kind of like in 2 pairs, because some of the reflexes kind of go together. But I want you to make sure you look at the full list on page 87. They have 9 reflexes listed. Make sure you do look through those. Okay, the first one I'm going to talk about is the rooting reflex. It occurs when the infant's cheek is stroked or the side of the mouth is touched, and the baby will turn his or her head in an effort to find something to suck. So this is obviously a survival mechanism. It helps the baby find the nipple. Now, if I touch them with my finger, they'll still cause a reflex, but the purpose is that when the mother goes to breastfeed, the nipple may, miss their mouth on one side or the other, and so the baby will turn their mouth to find the nipple. Okay, this kind of goes with the sucking reflex. Well, this occurs when newborns automatically suck on an object placed in their mouth. So as soon as they do contact the nipple, using the rooting reflex, they find the nipple, and then when it enters their mouth, they automatically suck on it. And so these 2 reflexes together help them find the nipple and then suck on it to get nourishment. And once again, because they're reflexes, they're not choosy. So if you put your little pinky in the baby's mouth, you'll feel them do this sucking reaction on it, and they're not deciding to. So don't be like, oh look, he really likes my little finger. I mean, it's not like whether he likes it or not. He or she. I mean, they can't help themselves. Right. So anyways, this sucking reflex enables the newborn to get nourishment. Before they have associated a nipple with food, right? They have no mental concept of what they're doing. They're just feeding with this automatic reflex. It's also a self-soothing mechanism. This is why sometimes pacifiers will help a baby sleep. Okay, let's go on. So those are the first 2. Then we have the moral reflex. Is a neonatal startle response that occurs in reaction to a sudden intense noise or movement. So if they get startled, also you can cause a moral reflex if the baby feels like they're about to fall, if they feel like they're falling. So if you're holding a baby in your 2 hands and you kind of like suddenly drop one of your hands a little bit so that they get the perspective that they're starting to fall, you'll see this response. So what they do is they throw their head back, they fling out their arms and legs, and they arch their back, and then they contract the movements, meaning that they're bringing their limbs back in towards center. So they fling all their limbs out, and then they pull them inwards. And this is believed to be a way of grabbing for support while they're falling. Well, this may not be as important in today's world, but there was a time in our evolutionary history where our babies were basically riding on our backs, in order to move about, before we had cribs and strollers and all that kind of stuff. I mean, especially if you go back to when we're, if you buy into all this, like because you believe in science. I mean, if you go back to when, we were still living in the trees, and we were evolving from primates. I mean, like little baby, monkeys and gorillas and whatnot, they cling to their mother's backs, and this is how they travel about. So at some point, it's believed that that as humans, we also traveled about on our mother's backs, and so if you started to fall and you were to, and the baby quickly does this motion, they might be able to bring their hand back in to contact something. Um, if they do contact something with one of their hands, this next reflex comes into play, the grasping reflex. It occurs when something touches the infant's palms. So if they've just done a moral reflex and then their palm contacts something like a piece of hair, or I don't know, maybe in more, if it was to happen in more modern times, maybe a piece of clothing, maybe there are some baby devices that people use to carry babies on the backs. Maybe they contact that baby carrying device. Maybe, anyways, if anything hits their palm, they will grasp it tightly, and they can support their own weight. Okay, with this reflexive grasping. So if you put your fingers in, one finger in each of a baby's palms, you can lift them up, and they're not going to fall. Because of this reflex motion, they will cling and cling and cling to your fingers. It's reflexive, so they can't decide to let go. Eventually, the muscles would, if you hold them up long enough, the muscles would tire and they would eventually fall. But you're safe for a little while. Like you could pick a baby up like that with them grasping your fingers. I'm not, don't do anything dangerous with, but you could just experiment if you're around a baby. It's because they won't let go. Okay, anyway, so these go together. You can see that one is like kind of, you fling out and you fling your arm back in, and then if you contact something, you use the grasping reflex. And we can see that a picture here. Well, where's that picture? Was it back? Oh, back here. You can see the grasping reflex, a little baby grasping onto this adult's finger. And we can also see, we can see the moral reflex in that first picture. You can see the baby flinging its arms outwards. Yeah. Let's go on. So once again, those are 4 reflexes. Learn the other ones as well. Gross motor skills. We call gross motor skills any kind of large muscle physical motions, such as walking or crawling, or reaching with your arm. I mean, like if you're using your arms or your legs, I mean, it's a gross motor skill. Or even your neck, as in posture, which we're about to get to. So development of posture. Posture is a dynamic process linked with sensory information in the skin, joints, muscles, which tell us where we are in space. So posture is like holding yourself upright, like sitting upright, for instance. Newborn infants cannot do this. You probably know that already. They can't sit with their head, upright. They cannot voluntarily control their posture initially in life. So they'll just flop about. So they can't, they can't sit. Or I don't know, whatever. They can't sit up. Let's just say they'll just flop right down. So they have to learn posture. They have to learn what's called postural control. We're about to talk about learning to walk, and this is linked to posture and postural control. Especially once you start walking upright. I mean, like controlling your posture is, has to be established before you can possibly stand, and especially before you can possibly walk. So they are linked. Learning to walk, babies can stand by 10 to 12 months. Okay, and you can read the rest on your own. It's just kind of going through. I'm looking, nothing too important here. Practice new motor skills. Okay. And so typically, they're standing by about 10 to 12 months. Walking usually occurs just after the first year. There's a wide range. You could start walking at 8 months. You could wait till you're 18 months. I mean, some babies are kind of lazy. They kind of wait an extra while, but still, it won't, if whether you're or a little bit earlier or a little bit later than the average, it doesn't affect your long-term development. So you may be a proud parent because your baby starts walking at 8 or 9 months, but it doesn't mean they're going to be an athlete or anything. Let's go on. Once again, I'm going to go through this real quick. I think the first year motor development milestones and variations. So just understand what the milestones refer to: grasping, rolling, sitting, crawling, standing, walking. Understand that lots of babies, more and more babies, kind of skip the crawling stage now. This is one of the results of the putting babies to sleep on their backs. A baby needs significant tummy time in order to establish the right muscles that leads to crawling behavior. If they're always put on their backs, then that baby won't develop the right muscles in order to crawl. So if you want a crawling baby, and it's not necessary that they go through that stage, I mean, then you need to give them tummy time during the day. You still put them on their back at night. During the day, when you're around and monitoring them, you put them on their fronts, while they're awake so they can kind of build up some muscles, appropriate muscles. Okay. What's linked to reaching milestones earlier? Larger infants who are larger at birth, their overall size increase over the first year. So bigger babies do reach the milestones earlier. Those that are breastfed as well tend to reach them earlier. The timing of these milestones can vary by 2 to 4 months and can be considered completely normal. Experiences modify the onset of these accomplishments. Like if there's no opportunities for a baby to, let's say, stand, then they'll be later to stand. I mean, like they need, in order to learn to stand, they have to have the opportunity, meaning that it's good to have something that they can hold on to pull themselves up, because this is how they start standing. They find something that they can use, grasp with their hand, and then they kind of pull themselves up to standing position. So sometimes they need environmental supports, or it could be a parent that's helping them stand up. You're holding their arms while they stand. But so those are the kinds of experiences that might slow or speed up the development of certain milestones. Once again, it's not that important whether they start a little bit earlier or a little bit later. Once again, it's not those that start later catch up anyways to the early starters. So caregiver participation enhances new skill development. As I was mentioning, if you do things like, hold their hands while they stand, they're learning to stand on their own. You're increasing the right skills for them to learn to walk a little bit earlier. And there are tribes that do this. Right from birth, they do things like exercise their legs, like in a walking motion, and in order to teach early posture, they dig holes. There's one tribe, they dig holes and put the babies in, sitting upright in a hole in the ground, and then actually it actually works. I mean, compared to U.S. children, those babies start the milestones about a month ahead on average of the U.S. babies. Once again, in the long run, it's not going to really matter, but it shows that experience does make a difference. This is in your book. You can look at kind of where these milestones typically happen, and kind of the typical range for each one. Okay, I don't really need to go through it. In the second year of life, what happens with toddlers? And by the way, if I haven't mentioned it, I'll tend to refer to toddlers as the second year of life, infants as the first year. So toddlers become more skilled and mobile. Okay, by 13 to 18 months, they can pull a toy and climb steps. By a year and a half to 2 years, they can walk quickly and run a little bit. They can balance while on their feet while squatting. Okay, I guess that's important. They can walk backwards and stand and kick a ball, stand and throw a ball. They can jump. Okay, they can do lots. Let's go on. Fine motor skills, we're just going to have this one slide. So when we talk about fine motor skills, we're talking about finely tuned movements such as finger dexterity. So fine motor skills usually is about the use of fingers. It would also apply to using your mouth, though. I mean, your mouth is a fine motor skill device, And so something like learning language is a fine motor skill, technically, using your tongue and lips and mouth properly. Okay, but we used to talk about grasping, and one of the important early developments is the pincer grasp. This is around 9 to 10 months of age, and this is when they can pick. This allows them to pick up small objects using they use their thumb and forefinger. So something like a little piece of cereal or a little bit of fruit or something, they could actually pick it up using this kind of grasp. Before they learn the pincer grasp, they tend to use their whole hand. Something called I guess I should tell you, it's called the palmar grasp. Develops before this one. A palmar grasp is picking up bigger objects using your whole hand. So something like a typical block, the size of a square block. I mean, they can pick that up before they've ever developed a pincer grasp. They use their whole hand with a palmar grasp, but they can't pick up that Cheerio, or that little bit of fruit until they learn this grasp. And then they can start holding crayons eventually, and so this is a very important. It shows like the development of more fine motor control development and control when they can start picking up small objects. Okay, and I've decided that's it. I'm not going to really talk about the perceptual motor coupling, but you can read more about that. And that concludes video 2 on motor development with infants.